"What happened to your husband all of a sudden?" Jessica said thoughtfully. "He used to be a normal man. He loved you. But now—" "Yes," she sighed. "Lately he is as if he's been replaced. Comes home late, rude all the time, and says it's all because of the load at work and fatigue. And what does he lack? You're such a smart, beautiful girl. These men are never satisfied." Andrea nodded in agreement. She and her friend met in a cafe to distract from the grey of everyday life, but it did not work. The conversation inevitably came down to a discussion of their hard women's lot. "Why don't you have a baby?" asked Jessica. "Maybe at least fatherhood will make your Douglas come to his senses. Sometimes it helps." "He doesn't want kids. We've been together for 7 years, and his only answer is, 'We need to live for ourselves.' Besides, we've been sleeping in separate bedrooms for a month, so the question of children is definitely closed." Taking a sip of an Americano, Andrea thought about the fact that her family life became as bitter as this coffee. She met Douglas when they were both 17 years old. It happened by chance and was probably the biggest mistake in her life. Her father had died early, and her mother brought her up in austerity. An outlet for her was a music class where she went to learn the flute. The teacher predicted a great future for her, but Andrea never thought about it seriously. She simply loved the atmosphere of the classes and the boy William who practiced with her. She didn't even remember what she liked better, the music lessons or the cheerful chit-chat on the way home. William was a year younger than Andrea. He was a little clumsy, and he also wore glasses, so he was not a success among his classmates. Yesterday, in physical training, I embarrassed myself again. I had to climb a rope, and earlier I mowed the neighbour's lawn and got a blister, and therefore I could not climb even a metre. Everyone was laughing so loudly, William said one day. "Those who laugh at you are shallow people," snorted Andrea. "In today's world it's much more important to be smart and knowledgeable, and you are all right with that." "Who won the computer science contest? You did. And computers are the future," said Andrea confidently. "Thank you for your support. It means a lot to me," blushing, murmured William. And on Valentine's Day, Andrea, among the heart-shaped cards from her girlfriends, found one from William. The next day, William asked if she liked his card, and immediately blushed profusely. Andrea looked at him closely and suddenly realized that this was important to him. She thanked him and, on an impulse, kissed him on the cheek. "Why?" William was even more embarrassed. "Well, I didn't give you a card, and I don't have anything else with me," shrugged Andrea. They did not talk about what happened anymore, but from that moment William looked at her as if he was ready for any feat for her sake. Maybe their relationship would have developed into something more, but then Douglas came rushing into Andrea's measured life like a whirlwind. It happened in early spring. William got sick with flu, and that prohibited Andrea to visit him, so as not to infect her. So Andrea had to go to the music lesson alone. It was unusually boring, and even a little scary, because the way from school was along the abandoned construction site, and at the dark time of day the usual ruins turned into ominous shadows. The girl walked and trembled with fear. Suddenly, out of the darkness in front of her, an unfamiliar guy suddenly jumped out and asked in an impudent tone what time it was. She was so shaken that she couldn't see the face of the clock. "It's 8:30, she said at random, hoping the guy would back off. "It's dangerous for girls to be out here at this time," he grinned. Andrea was going to run away, but she stumbled and fell to the ground. The guy grabbed her arm as if to help, and Andrea screamed in desperation, calling for help. "What's going on here?" a voice was heard, and another figure popped out of the darkness. The first guy immediately visibly shrank, and a frightened note appeared in his voice. "Oh, that crazy girl decided to sit a little on the ground. I wanted to help, and she screamed. Maybe it was you who scared her." "All right, go. I'll take care of it myself," said the stranger, and the first guy immediately disappeared. The stranger walked up to Andrea, held out his hand and helped her up. He reassured her, said she was safe, and offered to walk her home. Andrea, looking at the road, drowning in darkness, agreed. When they came out onto the lighted street, Andrea recognized Douglas. The guy was a local hottie who threw parties and raced a sports bike. All the girls were crazy about him. After learning that Andrea often returned home alone in the evenings, Douglas volunteered to accompany her. By the time William recovered, rumors about Andrea's new boyfriend had reached out. He did not ask anything about it and simply stopped going to music school. And then in general, he moved with his parents to another district. 3 years later, Andrea and Douglas decided to get married. Her mother did not approve of her choice. She saw that Douglas did not think about the future, loves only to have fun, and she was seriously concerned about how the young couple are going to live. The woman tried to dissuade her daughter, but she was sure that she and Douglas could handle everything. Growing up, Andrea realized how right her mother was. The years passed, but her husband did not even think of becoming more responsible. He was interested in nothing but motorcycles and hanging out with friends. He earned odd jobs and didn't want to change anything in his life. Even Andrea, working as a secretary, earned more than him. Many times she tried to talk sense into Douglas, but it was to no avail. "It's my vocation to deal with bikes. Do you really want me to bury my talent in the ground because of a few extra dollars?" resented Douglas during their quarrels, and Andrea left the subject. She felt sorry for her husband and continued to love him, but he was trampling on her feelings without thinking about it. And lately, Andrea felt that he was in love with another woman. She tried to convince herself that it was just her fantasy, but a call from her friend Jessica changed everything. "Hi, honey. Sit down if you're standing. I just saw your hubby come out of the restaurant with some dressed-up lady. I followed them, and they disappeared into a hotel. Come over. We'll give them a real show." Andrea drove in a cab, deep in her heart hoping that her friend had simply mistaken Douglas with someone similar. A triumphant Jessica was waiting for her at the hotel. She had already cunningly found out the number of the room where the two had retreated, and she was almost jumping in anticipation of exposing the wretched hubby. The friends went up to the 3rd floor. Jessica knocked on the door, and Andrea was standing still, hoping that it was a mistake. Hearing her husband's disgruntled voice from behind the door, there was no doubt. "Do not disturb, can't you see?" Douglas opened the door and stunningly stared at his wife. Without giving him a minute to recover, Andrea quickly entered the room and saw a half-naked woman on the bed. Then she gave her husband a resounding slap and ran out of the room. Jessica caught up with her friend downstairs. "You did the right thing. That's what he needs. Cry or shout if you like, but don't keep it to yourself." "I want a drink," said Andrea quietly. The friends went to the nearest bar, and after a couple of glasses of wine, Andrea cried and said how she hated Douglas because he ruined her life. Jessica, having treated Andrea with cognac, dragged her into a karaoke, and sad thoughts have almost completely left Andrea's head. Already at midnight, the girls went out on the street. Andrea wanted to call a cab, but she couldn't find her phone in her bag for a long time, and Jessica decided to try her luck and hitch a ride. "Would anyone refuse to do a favor for pretty girls like us?" she declared. But the drivers drove by, and the ones that stopped invited them only to continue the evening in a cosy spot. Suddenly a black SUV pulled up next to them. The window lowered, and Andrea stared in amazement at William's face, so familiar and almost unchanged over the years. "Hi, where do you need to go?" the man asked as if nothing had happened. "Jessica needs to go home," said Andrea in a weak voice. "As for me, I don't know yet," she added faintly. "Is this your friend?" asked Jessica curiously. "An old friend," answered William for Andrea. Jessica jumped in the back seat and became quiet. Andrea sat down next to William, and while they were driving, she only glanced sideways at him, noting how manly and respectable her old friend had become. Today, none of the girls who had laughed at him as a child would have stayed indifferent. The car stopped in front of Jessica's driveway. She thanked William and, winking at Andrea, headed for home. "Shall I take you home?" the man asked uncertainly. "No, I'm not ready right now." Andrea shook her head. "Will you tell me what happened?" asked William. Andrea was not used to sharing her problems with everyone, but perhaps because of the alcohol or of William's presence, she suddenly nodded. They got out of the car and wandered through the alleys of a nearby park while Andrea told William her story. "This is how my life has turned out. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, but I'm glad I met you today because I wanted to apologize for leaving you back then." "No, it was my own fault." William shook his head. "I should have fought for you and I gave up. Honestly, I should be thanking you. You were the only one who believed in me. Maybe without your support, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. Actually, my married life is no better than yours. I'm on the verge of divorce. My wife has only shopping and travel on her mind. We live like strangers. If then, many years ago, I was able to keep you..." Andrea looked into his eyes. "So, keep me, at least today." They went to William's apartment, where he was living when he wanted to be apart from his wife. It was the first night of love in their lives, and Andrea realized that she had never loved Douglas. In the morning, Andrea, embarrassed, entered the kitchen. William cheerfully kissed her cheek and said that breakfast was almost ready. The girl timidly sat down on a chair and William asked what was wrong. Carefully choosing her words, Andrea apologized for the things she had said to him last night and for coming here. William threw his fork on the plate with a jingle. "Andrea, I need you. I realized that today. Marry me," he asked in a dropped voice. "What? But you are married, aren't you?" "So am I, yet." Andrea looked at him with an incomprehensible look. "It doesn't mean anything. We made a mistake, but we are meant for each other and we should be together. I'm filing for divorce, and you could too. In a few months we'll be free." Andrea hugged William and said she would marry him. After breakfast he drove Andrea home, promising to call her back. Andrea immediately told her cheating husband that she was divorcing him. "Now you can go out with your mistresses as much as you want. You're free." Douglas tried to object, but Andrea didn't let him finish and disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door in his face. The next few days passed in lingering anticipation of a call from William, but the phone was silent. Then Andrea decided to call herself. To her surprise, a woman who introduced herself as William's wife picked up the phone and said that Andrea could discuss all questions with her. "Where is William?" she asked, immediately sensing something bad. "He had an accident, and now he's in intensive care. He's in a coma, but the doctors don't give any guarantees," said William's wife indifferently, and hung up. Andrea was horrified. In half an hour, she and Jessica were already in the hospital, but she could not get to William as she was nobody to him. Jessica calmed her friend and said that if William woke up and recovered, he would find Andrea himself. There was no other way out, and Andrea went home, packed her things, and moved in with her mother. And a month later, she realized that she was pregnant by William. Her son was born right on time, and Andrea did not even think about the name. She named him William, in memory of her beloved. Andrea still lived with her mother and had no idea whether her beloved was still alive. A year passed. One day, as usual, she went to the park for a walk with her son. The boy was running, chasing pigeons. Andrea wanted to warn the child, fearing that he would fall, but did not have time. He was picked up in the arms of a man. Andrea looked at him and could not believe her eyes. "William? You're alive!" "Yes, with God's help," he said calmly. "I only came to my senses half a year ago. I divorced my wife and started looking for you. By some miracle, I remembered the address of your friend Jessica, and she told me where I could meet you. And don't be offended that she didn't tell you anything. I asked her because I wanted to surprise you. They were quiet for a while. Maybe it's too late already, but I have to ask. Do you still agree to be my wife?" asked William hopefully. "Yes," nodded Andrea happily. "Well, son, shall we go see your new house?" William asked the boy. The boy ran happily, and the doves, as angels blessing the family with the rustlings of their wings, flew up.